Welcome to this week's episode of On Record PR. As usual, you are here with your hosts, Jennifer Simpson Carr and Gina Rubel. And today we are joined by our incredible teammate and colleague, Maria Aronson. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
So you are listening into three women of six on our team who attended the Legal Marketing Association annual conference in New Orleans this week. So we are as caffeinated as we can be and recording this episode on Friday to release on Monday, April 27th. We were lucky enough to be joined by our teammates Kim Miller, Mahalet Ropar, and Selden Hernandez. Gina, I think to date, the largest team we've had representing Maria Rubel at the LMA annual conference. Is that right?
Absolutely. It was a huge investment, but one that was worth the time that we got to spend with thought leadership and clients and each other. I mean, really each other.
Yes. And we were so proud that we actually, with our six teammates, covered every single region, LMA region in the United States. So we were fully covered from the east to west coasts and were able to attend each of the regional meetups, which was very exciting.
And we were at every session during the primary conference except the CMO experience because we're not permitted in there as strategic service providers. But it was great content from that of which we attended.
Excellent. So this year, there were 1,300 legal marketing and business development professionals. And as usual, it is the largest gathering of professionals that do what we do in the industry. And what comes with that gathering is diversity of perspective, geography, experience, where people are in the world and where they are in their positions and the type of work that they do. And the theme this year was tradition and transformation, which I actually think was so fitting for the conversation because we're at an interesting moment right now in the industry. There is no shortage of conversations continuing around AI and market pressures. But what we started to see this year was that law firms were really talking about operationalizing the changes that are happening. So let's talk about the themes and takeaways that made us pause and think that these are the things we really need to be talking about in this moment. So big picture question, and Maria, since this is your first time on the podcast, we're going to put you on the spot. When you step back and look across everything coming out of the conference and the sessions that you were able to attend, what felt like the real story to you?
Well, I think the real story looking at the conference is that marketing professionals are really the glue that is holding the law firm and is really putting the law firm together during transformational times. We are taking it from tradition to transformation, and they are the change agents at the moment. And so I think along with AI and geo and pricing changes, it's really about how those law firm professionals are working with lawyers and management to take the legal business and evolve it into a new era.
And it's interesting you say that. I agree 100%, Maria. And one of the challenges is that is in fact the truth, what we're seeing in big law. So your legal professionals have a seat at the table, but mid-market and smaller firms, that's not always the case. And those same mid-market, and this was said over and over and over again, if firms don't have other legal professionals with a seat at the table, they will not remain relevant for very long. And so I thought that was a key takeaway because we are going to continue to see aggressive mergers and acquisitions, lateral hires, practice groups moving, and the very survival of firms, as we know all too well. I mean, we spoke to many of our colleagues from McGlinchey Stafford, that's no longer in business. And I won't say or can't say why, but I would say that that's just one example of a firm that's no longer in business. It was a mid-market firm. Certain changes happened and they didn't weather the storm. So I say that out of respect, but also to say that the next few years are going to be very defining in this industry. And we heard that over and over and over again.
So that's great perspective. And I personally saw two gaps. I saw an awareness gap, and maybe I should better define it as the firms who might be covering their eyes and saying, we're not going to try it, things aren't changing, client expectations aren't really shifting. And then there's this gap in execution. So the firms are acknowledging that this is happening and they're aware of changes in the world, but they're not taking the steps to actually implement change. And the further along those two groups of people wait, I personally think the further behind they will become, given how quickly things are changing. And I wonder, Maria, maybe we'll start with you. Did you see the same thing, or do you have a different perspective on that?
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, firms need to anticipate disruption right now. The legal industry is evolving, and the further they the more they wait, the harder it's going to be for them to play catch up, right? So it's really about how can you maximize your use of data, your use of content, your use of your legal professionals to really improve business operations at the moment.
And it's interesting. It's not just the legal industry, it's all professional service industries. And I want to acknowledge that as the CEO and founder of Gina Rubel, we have the same challenge. And so if we don't stay at the forefront of change, so I think why I bring that up is we are in it together. This is not us versus them. We as a PR agency are going through this same transformation, the age of AI, which has changed everything. And I mean, I remember at our agency retreat was it the end of 2022, Jennifer, early 2023?
Early 2023.
Remember I asked ChatGPT to write a bio for me, and it was terrible. I mean, we have no idea where it was pulling from. It was really awful. If I do it today, it's nearly perfect. And so it's really interesting. And that's just, gosh, it's not even it's 3 years. And so I say that because it's relevant to all of us, bottom line.
So given that our work, and Gina, you touched on this, but let's dive into it further. Given our work is communications, PR, media relations, telling those stories, how does this play out for our agency, and how does this play out for our clients?
Wow, that's a loaded question, and I'm going to try to sum it up into some key points. First is the work we're doing and where our clients see value. So, for example, a lot of clients are now using their internal tools, whether it be Claude or Harvey or even ChatGPT internally or Copilot, and they're drafting their own press releases. So instead of us drafting them, we're editing them. So that is cutting down on time, which is where they see value is in the strategy, right? No different than lawyers. So we're seeing that play out as one. Just like law firms, we are being asked to give counsel at a much higher level than ever before. So most of our clients on retainer are saying, I'm looking to you to tell me how this is going to play out in the real world. How can we manage our reputation in this instance? they still see value, but they see value differently. And that makes sense, right? Where we used to take a transcript from a conference or a CLE for a lawyer and turn it into thought leadership, they're taking that same thing and doing a first draft using a generative AI tool, then handing it to us to review. So it's changing the way we work with our clients. It's redefining where they see value. And it's allowing us to be even more strategic because, frankly, I've never really thoroughly enjoyed the day-to-day tasks. I've always enjoyed the strategy. So when somebody goes to Maria, who is a former reporter, she's worked at a number of Am Law firms, they're looking to Maria for her expertise, right? What is your experience? How might this play out? What is the best way for us to do this? It's no longer just, what should the headline be? Although that's still important. And I think Maria too, you can speak a little bit to around how content and thought leadership, that was a big theme, how that's changed in the industry as well.
And I think it's still changing. There have in the past been, firms that hold their financials and still are, and holds like a lot of things close to them. They will allow reporters to tell their story, whereas they really need to tell their story. They need to be out there saying, this is our brand, this is who we are. Because as AI and geo, evolve, what is findable and what is out there is changing, right? If you're not found by those AI crawlers, your history, your story, the way you tell it may not be found. And that's how clients in the future will be finding, their lawyers.
Jennifer, you talked about some data at some point.
Yes.
I can't remember what it was, but I want to hear it again.
Maria just made me think the point about, and I wrote a note, the point about firms telling their story versus letting others tell the story for them is exactly the data point I wanted to share, which is Muckrack has reported that 89% of the information pulled from generative engines to prepare a response to a question is pulled from earned media. And so Maria's point about firms telling their own story just supports that, because if you let someone else tell your story, that earned media is going to develop an answer or a response that you may not necessarily agree with and may not be accurately representing your firm or your attorneys.
I remember talking to one client years ago and they said, well, our ultimate goal is to be listed in the Am Law 200. And then I said, well, are you going to be willing to share your revenue data and profits per partner and so on? The answer was no. I'm like, okay. It's like the firms that say we want cross-selling and we want to make that a big theme this year, but people are only compensated for origination. And it doesn't work that way. So it's interesting.
No, you really have to have all the pieces of the puzzle together. You have to have the content. You have to be speaking to reporters. You have to be thinking about doing podcasts. You have to be doing the speaking engagements. It really all comes together in the end.
Well, one thing's for sure is even though our industry is changing, that not just the legal marketing industry in-house, but the strategic service providers as well. Generative engine optimization has made us even more viable for the long term, which is a good thing because they do need all those things. So a little bit of my fears going into the conference were dispelled. Worries about becoming obsolete. Legal marketing is not going to become obsolete, and service providers are not going to become obsolete. We just have to be even more agile than we've ever have had to be in the past.
It's a great point. Let's pause here for a message from our sponsor, and we will come back and pick up on the conversation.
Thanks, Jen.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So, Maria and Gina, we are back from our sponsor message. And Gina, I want to pick up on what you were just saying about flexibility and agility of the legal marketing community during this transformative time. What does it look like and why is it so important?
So flexibility and agility really means adopting new technologies, training on new technologies, being willing to fail on new technologies and move forward with other ones. For big firms, they are coming up with customized platforms for clients and they're jumping in and they're trying to figure it out. And sometimes it's going to fail. So what's the saying?
Fail
Fail
fast.
fast. Thank you. It's okay. And we as lawyers are not really comfortable with that word, but it's okay if you learn from it and readjust and take an important turn. I think one of the things too is thinking about talent acquisition and retention and what that looks like, because that's a game changer. I know, Maria, you went to some of those sessions. What were you hearing about agility in that space?
Yeah, I think it's more than technology. It's really with lateral integration and with mergers happening, business professionals, legal business professionals are being brought in and consultants are being brought in early to help with that transition. And that's very wise, right? Because then you can have those business plans, you can have those communications plans, you can help with integration much earlier and make that process much more successful.
So some of the information that you had shared, Maria, is that it was reported that a significant percentage of laterals underperform when they join a firm, and a lot leave within the first few years. I know, Gina, you and I spoke episodes ago about the cost to a firm of an associate leaving is something in the range of $1 million. And so if firms' primary goals are related or centered around growth and acquisition strategies of talent, it sounds to me from your answer, Maria, like the integration needs to start much earlier in the process, probably even before the lateral joins. So from what you've heard in your experience, what does this integration look like in practice? And how does it tie back to the communications?
Sure. So it was 70% of laterals underperform, and over half of them leave within the first 5 years. And
Wasn't that, who said that? It was somebody from Clyde and Co., right?
it was Stacey McReynolds.
Okay.
Yeah, she had said that during her presentation. And really what that means is, when you have laterals come on board, you really have to have them start talking to business development. You have to have them start talking to communications so they can create the plans to really cross-sell their platform, introduce them to clients, and really start that business planning ahead of them joining the firm, right? You want them to hit the ground running. And, within the first few days, they're doing a lot of setup, but you really want them to be speaking with colleagues, speaking with clients, making those correct introductions. So they build their book of business right away and they can sell their platform and build their brand in a much easier fashion.
So with these big changes, communications and leadership are two words that come to mind. And within that, I I was really moved by Cassie Chandler, her leadership keynote. And we'll drop a link to Cassie's bio so you can learn more about her perspective and her experience. But she framed what we are all dealing with, not just in the legal industry, but in the world generally, as not just change, but a constant state of disruption and a constant state of crisis. And when we think about it that way, at least for me, it changed the way that I view leadership, because it's not adapting to one big change. It's helping your team adapt to these almost micro changes that happen every day, or micro disruptions. What we see on the news, what we see on social media, the technology that our law firms or agencies are rolling out at the moment. So I wonder if either of you have thoughts on leadership in this moment, or ideas for our listeners on how they can really lead through change, regardless of where they are in their organization.
I think, Cassie was fantastic, moving at every level and engaging. And she talked about transformative leadership. So, and I put that in quotes, right? So one of the things, the way she put it, and it was that transformative leadership are people who know their power, extend their power, and embrace their own champions within. And so I'm quoting that. And I thought it was really telling, especially as a woman in the industry, because there have been many times where I haven't early on known my power, known that I could speak up, had fear of change. And she really talked about it. And I think this is so important both for anyone in the industry, whether you're a partner, an equity partner, a senior partner, or a new coordinator in a legal marketing department. It doesn't matter. It's about knowing who you are, where you are, and leading. And Jennifer, we've talked about this before. There's a huge difference, and I know we have some content on our website about the difference between management and leadership. They are very different. You might be taught to manage, but does that mean you know how to lead? And I'm reminded that as a trained lawyer, I was not taught to manage or lead in law school. And these are all things that, while I hope I do well, I'm constantly evolving and learning. And it is transformative. It means that you're not only helping to transform your organizations, but you're also constantly transforming yourself. And I think that's something I got from her keynote.
Maria, any thoughts?
I think, Gina, you sort of hit the nail on the head, right? It's about being able to transform your organization, but also transform yourself. You have to be constantly learning, constantly on your toes, because communication right now is at the speed of light, right? I mean, every minute of every day, the news is constantly fluctuating. You're being inundated with messages. You are, change can happen within 10 minutes, within 1 minute, right? And so you have to be ready as a leader to be able to transition and be flexible enough to take on a crisis situation, to be pulled into a lateral hire, to handle, a content issue or matter. And so just, taking it step by step and looking at the situation, being able to breathe and lead through it. That's really what counts.
And I don't want to forget something. This is really important for law firms and the lawyers who lead them. It can't be, it's always been done this way. And it can't be, I know what's best. Because things are changing every single day. And it's time to embrace the future like we've never seen before. And those are things that are going to be hard. But as the senior generation of law firm leaders exit, we are going to see a completely different industry from what it was even 5 years ago.
And I want to reiterate to those listening, because this really stuck with me, and I know we've talked about it before, but Cassie emphasized it during her program. Leadership is about leading where you are. It is not about the title you have or the title that you don't have. We should feel empowered every single day to show up and lead those who are around us, maybe below us on the org chart, above us on the org chart, next to us on the org chart, in how we help people shape their confidence, how we help them shape how they think about the world and about themselves and about the work that they're doing. And it is so much more important in environments where things feel uncertain, whether it's uncertainty in your organization, uncertainty in someone's individual life, or in the world, which I think we're all feeling right now. And so I just encourage everyone, put your title aside and think about how you can show up every single day and lead the people around you in a way that builds positive momentum.
You know, Jennifer, I want to share something. I had the pleasure to interview Giff Thornton, the managing partner of Adams and Reese, which is a client. And one of the things that really struck me in what he said was that, so he is a full-time managing partner. He doesn't practice. He's been the managing partner for 11 years. And he said, when my tenure is complete, it would be my goal that no one would take notice. And that really struck me as what a leader says. And so I wanted to share that because that is he's probably the only managing partner I've ever interviewed that has said something that way. Many have said, we've worked with many that have said incredibly profound things. But not to be worried about one's own legacy, but to be focused on the legacy of the organization is what I would call true leadership.
Yeah, that's an incredible sentiment. So as we close our time together, I want to end with one question to both of you. If we were to have this conversation in a few years, what would need to be true at that time for each of you to say that the legal industry handled this moment of transformation well?
Ooh.
I know you both were not expecting that.
We were not.
Go ahead, Maria, you go first.
Okay, all right. I'll do my best. So I think that technology in the next few years is going to be key, right? There's no surprise. There was a lot of talk about AI at the conference. And I think the transition to using the technology and how that will impact business and how content comes into play with that is going to be a huge focus. How that's going to impact billing rates and how that will impact leadership and consolidation within the industry. I think all of those were big key points, and we're going to see a lot of that within the next 3 years. How organizations can seamlessly work through all of those obstacles and how their teams work together to do that will really be key to the legacies of those organizations. And I think that, in the future, law firms will have to have very tight-knit teams led by those like very strong leaders that can handle these flexible situations.
For me, Jennifer, what will define success of the industry as a whole is the survival of all of these incredible legacy firms, especially those in the middle market. because many of them are getting eaten up because they don't necessarily have the same resources as big law, and yet they serve many of the same clients. So I would like to see the middle market survive well and thrive, not just a conglomeration of several hundred firms with over 1,000 lawyers. So that's really, I love choices. So, I may love dark chocolate, which is my favorite, but I like all different types of dark chocolate. And I really think in a world where culture still remains so important, having the ability to choose among firms with different cultures is going to remain important. And that's where I continue to hope that the industry will be just 5 years from now.
And since I put you both on the spot, I'll make myself answer the question too. And I agree with you both. I think another thing that I heard this week was there's a gap between how leaders think about how they show up and how they're actually experienced. And so I think this ties in to both of your points, which is I think the leaders that can say, I can learn from those around me and learn what I can do better and what I can do differently and what I can keep doing that's great, right? Almost how we do our client feedback, start, stop, continue.
Yep.
I think those are the leaders that can identify where there are gaps in the firms and gaps in leadership and gaps in collaboration. Maria, as you said, the really tight-knit communities of colleagues, and move their firms forward in a really positive way and a way that allows, I was going to say trust, but the safety to say, here's a gap in the firm, here's an opportunity, and let's work together to fill that gap in a way that helps advance the firm.
Well, and I'm going to throw a shameless plug out there because you're absolutely correct. And it's not a plug for me, it's a plug for the international faculty. We're already doing that. We're bringing highly seasoned members of the legal community into law firms and legal organizations, having these very conversations because they don't know what they don't know. And, for Fiore Rubel, I really see that as a major differentiator today and into the future, because even myself, I'm very self-aware, and yet I still work with an executive coach. I always want to be more self-aware, and I always want to show up better and do better and all of those things. So not always easy to get lawyers to want to do that. I admit I have a big ego, but that's the type of work that our international faculty can bring, because lawyers aren't always aware, and that doesn't make them bad. It just makes them unaware.
I completely agree. So we will drop a link to our international faculty in the show notes because they are an incredible collective of individuals who are such a pleasure to collaborate with. Maria, I'm so glad that you have joined us on the show. Now you have to come back. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. It helps searchers find us, and continue to send your questions and topics and ideas for guests on our show to podcast@onrecordpr.com. We read every single message we receive, and we really do appreciate them. Thank you for tuning in every other week, and we will see you again in May. Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Maria.
Bye.
Thank you.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Maria Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.